My name is Naomi Voss, and I was 33 when I realized that the name printed on 12,000 wine bottles a year did not legally belong to the family who put it there. Not the winery, not my father, not my brother, who signed autographs on that name at wine festivals from Sonoma to Charleston. It belonged to me. It had belonged to me for 11 years, filed in a government database 3,000 miles from the vineyard, waiting quietly the way a spare key waits in a drawer nobody remembers filling. I want to be clear about what this story is. It is not a story about a bottle smashed in anger or a scene with raised voices in a tasting room, though there is a scene like that, and it comes later. It is not the center of the story. The center of the story is a manila folder, a certificate with a gold seal, and a sentence I said so quietly that a room full of powerful people had to lean forward to hear it. The family business was called Hollow Creek Vineyards, 41 acres on a hillside 2 hours north of the city, a name and a label design that had appeared on magazine covers, on the wall of a wine bar in Manhattan, and on the side of a delivery truck that passed my apartment every week, without my brother ever once knowing I lived on that. For 8 years I had been the one who designed that label, wrote the words on the back of every bottle, built the website that took the orders, and answered the emails when wine club members complained. My brother Derek held the title of founder and head winemaker, a title printed on business cards paid for with company money. I held a United States trademark registration, number 5714882, filed in my name alone, for a mark called Hollow Creek. They knew this, in the vague way people know about a document they have never actually read. What they did not know was that a 3-year distribution agreement worth $4.2 million was about to be signed on a name I could take back with a single notarized form. I was invited to the signing dinner, too. They thought I was coming to run the poor station. I had already printed the certificate by then, folded once, tucked into an inside jacket pocket, and I had already decided, quietly, somewhere between a government mailer and a magazine bellline that erased me in a single sentence, that I was done asking anyone's permission to match. Visual: a hillside vineyard at dusk, a hand-painted wooden sign, a delivery truck. I was 15, the first time I understood that my hands were useful to my family in a way my name was not. That spring, our county held a youth entrepreneurship fair, and my father entered Derek, who was 17 and had never drawn a straight line in his life, because he said a fair like that looked good for a boy who would someday run the vineyard. I spent 2 weeks in our garage after school building the concept myself, a mock label and business plan for a small batch wine, brand called Hollow Creek, named for the creek bed that cut through our lower field, painted by hand on butcher paper, because we did not own a printer that could handle cardstock. Derek watched television while I mixed paint colors to get the label exactly right. On the day of the judging, I carried the board to the fairgrounds in the bed of my father's truck, the wet paint smell still clinging to my sleeves. My mother squeezed my shoulder and said she didn't know what the family would do without my little talent. At the judging table, a county official asked who had developed the concept. My father stepped forward and said Derek had, that the boy had real vision, that he was learning the family trade. Derek stood beside him in a pressed shirt and shook the judge's hand, while I was sent to refold the table skirt. The entry won second place and $100 prize, which Derek spent that weekend on a fishing rod. I asked quietly, in the truck on the way home, if my name could at least go on the label, if we ever really made the wine. My mother turned around from the passenger seat and said, "It's not about you, Naomi." It's about the family name. She said it the way you note that the porch light needs a new bulb, a fact stated and then forgotten. I did not cry in the truck, and I cried later, in the garage, surrounded by the leftover paint, because I understood something that would take me 18 more years to fully name. I painted over the practice logo the next morning, a fresh coat of white over the letters I'd spent 2 weeks perfecting, and told myself it didn't matter, that a 15-year-old sketch was never going to mean anything anyway. I was useful. I was not worth a signature. Visual: a garage workbench, paint jars, a hand-lettered logo sketch. I was 22, home from design school for the summer, when the vineyard nearly went under and the $100 sketch from the fairgrounds finally became more than a memory. A late frost had killed 40% of the fruit. The bank had called the equipment loan for review, and my father sat at the kitchen table for 3 nights with a shoebox of invoices, saying we needed something people would remember, something that didn't look like every other bottle on the shelf. I rebuilt the old fairground concept from scratch, working at the kitchen table until 2 in the morning for 6 weeks, designing a full identity system, a word mark, a label die line, a tone of voice for the back label copy, and a simple website mock-up. All of it unpaid, all of it done, because I loved the creek and the hillside, and, if I am honest, because I still wanted to hear someone say my name out loud in a room or it mattered. A commercial design studio in the city had quoted my father $11,000 for exactly this work 6 months earlier. He had said it was too much. I did it for the cost of a new laptop battery and 40 nights of sleep. When it came time to file the trademark application that October, the family's attorney, a tired, kind man named Arthur Kessler, asked whose name should go on the registration, since the Vineyards LLC was not yet formed and wouldn't be for another 8 months. My father waved a hand and said, "Put it under Naomi for now. She's the one who made the darn thing. We'll move it over once we're official." I filed it under my own legal name, Naomi R.R. Voss, because nobody else in that kitchen wanted to deal with the paperwork, and because at 22, for now sounded like a formality, and not like a door I was quietly being handed the only key to. The registration issued the following June, number 5714882. Nobody ever moved it. Visual: a kitchen table at night, a trademark application form, a pen resting on a shoebox. I was 24 when I caught the mistake that would have ended the business before it ever really began, though no one thanked me for catching it. Derek had submitted our first commercial vintages label, artwork to the printer himself that spring, eager to hit a shipping deadline before a distributor showcase, approving the proof without sending it to me for a final check, since by then he considered label design basically done the moment I handed over a file. I found the error by accident, scrolling through the printer's confirmation email on my phone at 2 in the morning. The back label was missing the federal government warning statement required by law on every bottle of alcohol sold in the United States, along with the sulfite disclosure the winery was legally required to print under the same regulation. 10,000 bottles were scheduled to leave the printer in 6 days. Without that warning statement, every one of them would have been illegal to sell, subject to seizure, and would have jeopardized the federal label approval the winery needed on file before a single case could legally cross a state line. I called the printer myself at 7 that morning, paid a $400 rush fee out of my own account to halt the run, corrected the file, and resubmitted it before Derek had finished his coffee. I told my father what had happened that evening, expecting, if not gratitude, at least some acknowledgement of what $400 and one sleepless night had just saved. He nodded, said, "Good thing you caught it," and went back to his newspaper. At dinner the following week, I heard him tell my uncle that Derek had really gotten the label program running like clockwork this year. I did not correct him. I had already learned by 24 that correcting him rarely changed anything except the temperature of the room. Visual: a printer confirmation email on a phone screen at night, a federal warning label, a rush shipping receipt. I was 25 when I turned down a junior brand designer position at an agency in the city. A job with a real salary, health insurance, and a desk by a window, because my mother called the week before my start date to say my father's shoulder surgery had gone worse than expected, and someone needed to keep the wine club running while he recovered. Derek was 27 then, working the tasting room and building relationships with distributors. As my mother put it, her voice softening on the word relationships, as though it were a delicate instrument that might shatter under pressure. He was too busy building relationships. I was not too busy. I was available. That was the word my mother used. Available, as if I were a storage unit, as if I had no plans of my own stacked up inside me, waiting to be unpacked. I moved into the converted loft above the tasting room, the one with the propane heater that clicked all night, and a window that looked out on the gravel lot instead of the vines. I answered wine club emails at midnight from a laptop balanced on a wine crate. I redesigned the shipping boxes when the old ones kept arriving crushed. I built the online store myself using a platform I paid for out of my own checking account, because the vineyard's marketing budget that year was, functionally, zero. For 8 years, this was the rhythm. 8 years. I want you to hold that number. 2,920 days, more or less, of writing the back label copy at midnight, photographing every new vintage myself with a second-hand camera, and driving 40 minutes to the print shop because Derek's truck was, he said, not really built for boxes. The personal cost was never the labor. The labor I could do with my eyes closed by year 3. The cost was the life I did not build, while I kept somebody else's name shining. Visual: a converted loft above a tasting room, a laptop on a wine crate, a propane heater. At 26, I had saved $4,000 and found a small apartment 11 blocks from a design studio that had offered me a contract position, real clients, real invoices with my own name at the top. I gave my notice at the vineyard on a Tuesday. My mother did not raise her voice. She simply said the wine club renewal cycle was in 6 weeks, that Derek couldn't possibly learn the platform in time, that the members only trusted the voice they'd been reading in the newsletter for years, a voice they didn't know was mine, because every newsletter went out under the vineyard's name, never under a byline. She did not say, "Please stay." She said, "It's not about you, Naomi. It's about the family name." I unpacked the apartment before I'd even signed the lease. I stayed 3 more years. At 29, I met a man named Theo, a high school art teacher who thought my label sketches were the best work he'd seen outside a gallery, who laughed at my jokes about tannin levels in a way that made strangers at the bar turn to look. We dated for 14 months. He had a small house with a porch and a dog that eventually tolerated me. He asked me to move in after his lease ended in June. I wanted to, but harvest was in September, and the new vintage's packaging was due to the printer in August. And my mother had started introducing Theo at family dinners as Naomi's friend from town, even after I corrected her 3 separate times. Theo asked me once gently why his girlfriend's name appeared on nothing the family sold. I told him I was just helping out. He looked at me for a long moment and didn't argue. He left in July, not dramatically. No slammed door. He simply stopped asking me to choose him, because I had already chosen the packaging deadline, the newsletter voice, and a family that needed me to be available. Visual. A small apartment listing, a moving box, unopened, a porch swing. The mechanism was born on a Wednesday afternoon in February, when a plain government envelope arrived at my apartment, addressed to Naomi R. Voss, not to Hollow Creek Vineyards, not to my father, to me. I was 32. Inside was a declaration of use renewal notice from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, informing the registered owner of mark number 57-14882 that a maintenance filing was due within the next 90 days, or the registration would be canceled. I called my old design school roommate, Farah Delgado, who had gone on to become a trademark attorney in the city, mostly to ask how to fill out the form correctly, since I assumed it was a formality, the kind of paperwork Derek usually pushed across a table for me to sign without reading. Farah was quiet for a moment on the phone. Then she asked whether the Vineyards LLC had ever filed an assignment transferring the mark from my personal name into the company. I said I didn't think so. Ew. I said I'd never really thought about it. She pulled the public record while we were still on the phone. Well. Naomi, she said, her voice careful. The way a doctor's voice goes careful before delivering results. You own this. Not the LLC. Not your dad. You, personally, own the only thing that makes that winery worth more than the dirt it's sitting on. Everything else, the vines, the barrels, the equipment, that's just agriculture with good lighting. How sure are you? I asked her, and I could hear her clicking through the record on her end of the line. The soft tap of a keyboard, a pause exactly as long as it takes to read a legal document twice. As sure as a federal database can be, she said. This isn't a gray area, Naomi. This is about as black and white as intellectual property law gets. I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time after that call, the renewal notice still in my hand. I was not angry yet. I was doing math. Every wine club subscriber, every distributor relationship, every dollar of goodwill the family had built for 8 years had been built on top of a name that legally belonged to a woman they still called Naomi doesn't need the spotlight. She's not built for it. I filed the renewal. I did not tell anyone. I had a lever now. It was boring. Illegal. It was mine. Visual. A government envelope on a kitchen floor. A phone screen mid-call. A trademark certificate. Farah explained it to me plainly over coffee the following week, laying it out the way you'd explain a recipe, step by step, no drama in her voice at all. The winery had never signed a license agreement granting itself the right to use my mark. There had only ever been a verbal understanding, 8 years of assumption dressed up as a business plan. Which meant, legally, Hollow Creek Vineyards, LLC, was operating under a brand name it did not own and had never formally been permitted to use, a fact that would matter enormously to any sophisticated buyer's legal team and would matter most of all in a due diligence review ahead of a major deal. I realized while going through 8 years of my own bank statements at Farah's kitchen table, personally paid for the domain registration, the wine club hosting platform, and my design software subscription every single month since the beginning. A total, once I added the receipts, of $13,800. None of it reimbursed. Once I added... I did not act that weak. I did not act that month. I kept working, kept writing the newsletter, kept answering the wine club emails at midnight, because I was still deciding whether I wanted to be the kind of person who used a door like this one, quietly, without asking permission from anyone, the way my mother had never asked my permission for anything either. I decided I could live with it. I decided to wait for a reason. The family gave me one within the month. Visual. A coffee shop table. Bank statements fanned out. A calculator. The reason arrived in the March issue of a national wine trade magazine, a 6-page feature titled The Quiet Visionary Behind Hollow Creek, photographing Derek in the barrel room, holding a wine thief over an open barrel, wearing a canvas apron that had never once touched fermenting fruit. The apron was mine, borrowed from a photo shoot I had staged 2 years earlier for the website. The barrel room backdrop was mine, restyled from a mood board I had built. The article quoted Derek at length about his design philosophy, his commitment to storytelling, his belief that a label should feel like a memory. Language lifted almost sentence for sentence from the brand strategy document I had written for him to read aloud during interviews, a document he had apparently memorized without ever once mentioning who wrote it. He spoke for 4 full paragraphs about the creek that inspired the name without mentioning that I was the one who chose it, off a fairground poster board, when he was 17 and watching television. My mother framed the magazine spread and hung it in the tasting room beside the wine club sign-up sheet I had designed. My father mailed copies to every relative on both sides of the family. I was mentioned once, in a single sentence near the end, as additional support from the Voss family's marketing team. I read that sentence standing at the packing table, boxing wine club shipments with my own 2 hands, the tape gun still warm from use. By then, the renewal was already filed. The mark was already, unmistakably mine. I still hadn't decided if I would use it. Visual. A magazine spread on a tasting room wall, a wine thief over an open barrel, a packing tape gun. The pattern had repeated itself once already, 2 years earlier, sharper that time, the year Derek got engaged to a woman named Claire, whose family owned 3 well-regarded restaurants across the state and traveled in circles my parents were eager to impress. I designed the engagement party invitations, the table signage, and a custom commemorative label for a small batch bottling my father wanted to gift to Claire's parents. All of it finished in 11 days on top of my regular work. All of it unpaid. All of it because I still believed, foolishly, that being useful might eventually translate into being seen. The night of the party, I arrived in the one good dress I owned, and my mother met me at the door with an apron already folded over her arm. "We're short-staffed in the kitchen tonight," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Claire's parents are seated with us. It just makes more sense for you to help back there. You know the kitchen better than anyone." I did know the kitchen better than anyone. I had spent years learning every room in that building better than anyone, because I was always the one sent to stand in them alone. I spent the engagement party plating hors d'oeuvre, watching through the pass-through window as Claire's mother admired the commemorative label, asking who had designed anything so beautiful. I heard Derek's answer clear as a bell over the clinking of glasses. "Oh, we work with a few different people," he said. "Honestly, I handle most of the creative direction myself. I just don't always have time to execute it." I set down a tray of stuffed mushrooms and did not go back out for the toast. Visual, a folded apron at a doorway, a pass-through kitchen window, a tray of stuffed mushrooms untouched. Another incident followed within the month, this one in a glass-walled conference room at the Vineyard, during the first real meeting with Ridgeline Retail Group, a regional distributor chain, quietly exploring a 3-year exclusive agreement that would put Hollow Creek on shelves in 4 states. My mother asked me to sit in just to help with the visuals, the way you'd ask someone to bring extra chairs. I brought my laptop, a binder of every label proof I had ever produced, and tucked in the inside pocket a folded copy of the trademark certificate I had started carrying without fully admitting to myself what. Ridgeline's general counsel, a sharp, unhurried woman named Miriam Choi, asked a routine early question about brand ownership and intellectual property, the kind of question lawyers ask before anyone touches numbers. Derek looked at our father. Nay. Our father looked at me. I answered. I explained the trademark class, the goods description, the registration date, because I had written it, because I had lived inside every letter of it for 8 years. Miriam Choi looked at me with real interest and asked if I was counsel for the Vineyard. Derek laughed, a short, uncomfortable sound he used when he wanted to reclaim a room. She just handles some of our marketing stuff, he said. I'm the one who actually runs this place. Miriam Choi did not laugh. She looked at me for 1 second longer than was polite, then made a small note on her legal pad and moved on to distribution logistics, as though the question had simply been checked off a list. I looked down at the binder in my lap, at 8 years of my own handwriting in the margins. I thought about the certificate, folded in my bag. I thought about how easy it would be, how quiet, how permanent. Visual, a glass-walled conference room, a legal pad, a folded certificate in a jacket pocket. I did not act that day either. I drove home in silence while Derek talked on speakerphone to our father about the boat he wanted to buy once the Ridgeline deal closed, a 26-foot center console he had already priced out online. I sat in my car outside my apartment for 40 minutes with the engine off, thinking not about anger, but about arithmetic. 8 years of unpaid labor, wow. $13,820 of my own money, keeping the digital half of the business alive. 1 sentence in a national magazine. 1 sentence in a conference room. The same 6 words, worn smooth from decades of use, waiting somewhere in my mother's mouth for the next time she needed to close a door on me gently. I called Farah that night. I asked her plainly what my options were if I simply chose to stop granting permission for a use of my mark that had never been formally licensed in the first place, and whether a family relationship changed any of that math under the law. Not even a little, she said. The law doesn't have a line item for, but they're my brother. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Naomi, you've been letting them borrow your name for 8 years. You don't owe anyone an explanation for taking your own name back. I did not cry on that call. I took notes. Careful, orderly notes. The same handwriting I used for inventory logs and label proofs, because grief and strategy, I was learning, could sit on the same page without touching. I asked her to draft a formal cease and desist and license termination letter, effective on a date I would choose, and I asked her, carefully, what documents I would need if I ever wanted to hand someone proof in person in a room, all at once. She sent the folder 3 days later. I printed it. Ow. I did not schedule anything yet. I was waiting for the right room. Visual. A parked car outside an apartment building at night. A printed legal folder. A closed laptop. The right room turned out to be the vineyard's 20th Harvest Gala, held the second Saturday of September under string lights, strung between the old oak trees, the same trees I used to sketch as a teenager for label mock-ups nobody asked me to make. Ridgeline's CEO, a tall, tanned man named Warner Sinclair, was flying in personally to finalize terms before his legal team sent the agreement for signature the following Monday. 2 days before the gala, quietly, without announcing anything to anyone, I began the withdrawal. I logged into the domain registrar, paid for on my personal credit card for 8 straight years, and moved auto-renewal notifications to my own email only. I exported the full wine club member list to a private drive and removed shared editing access from the account. I logged into the social media accounts, which had always run through my personal login because Derek could never remember passwords, and reset them, saving the new credentials nowhere he could find. I canceled the automated email service that sent wine club renewal reminders, paid on my card since its second month of existence, $11 at a time. A bill so small, no one had ever thought to ask whose card it was charging. I had not deleted anything. I had not hidden a single piece of information the family could not legally request through proper channels. I had simply stopped holding the door open with my shoulder. No tragedy was due. By Friday morning, the website was throwing a hosting billing error. By Friday afternoon, the Vineyard's Instagram account, 61,000 followers built almost entirely from my photography, would not let Derek log in. My mother called 4 times. I let it ring. I was not hiding. I was simply, for the first time in 8 years, not answering on the first ring. Visual: a laptop screen showing a billing error, a phone buzzing on a table, unanswered. The cracks were small at first, the way a hairline fracture in a wine glass looks harmless until someone pours something hot into it. Derek texted me Friday night, casual, almost cheerful, asking if I knew why the Instagram login wasn't working, joking that I'd probably broken the internet again. I did not answer. My father called Saturday morning, an hour before the gala, his voice tight, asking if I could just quickly fix the website thing before guests arrived, because the QR code on the printed programs led to a page that wouldn't load. I told him I was running behind and would see him there. He texted again 10 minutes later, all capital letters this time, asking if I'd forgotten the wine club renewal batch that was supposed to go out that morning, since 3 members had already emailed asking why their charge had failed. I had not forgotten. I had simply stopped sending it. I was not running behind. Ew. I was standing in front of my closet, choosing a blazer I had bought myself with my own money, the week Farah sent the folder. I drove up the hillside road at 4 in the afternoon, past the same oak trees, the string lights already glowing faintly against the fading blue sky, Cattering vans parked in rows, a jazz trio tuning their instruments near the barrel room, where Derek's magazine photo had been taken 6 months earlier. My mother met me at the gate with a clipboard and a tight smile, the kind of smile she wore for photographs. "You're on pours tonight, sweetheart," she said, already turning away. "The good tables are for people who matter to the deal." I looked past her at the head table, at the empty seat with Warner Sinclair's name card, at Miriam Choi's name card. Beside it, at my own name printed nowhere at all. I picked up an apron. I tied it slowly, the same way I had tied one for a photo shoot 2 years before. "Of course," I said. Visual: string lights over an oak tree canopy, a clipboard with a seating chart, a folded apron. The toast came after the second course, my father tapping a fork against a glass of the vineyard's flagship red, the label I had painted by hand at 15, now printed in gold foil on 11,000 bottles a year. He spoke about legacy, about 20 years of hard soil and harder winters, about the son who had carried the family's vision into every state on the eastern seaboard. Derek stood, raised his glass, and thanked Ridgeline for believing in everything the Voss name stands for. My mother rose next to Warner Sinclair's chair and rested a hand lightly on his shoulder, the hostess gesture I had watched her perform my entire life. "Naomi's always been such a help behind the scenes," she said, her voice carrying easily over the string lights. "But this," she gestured at the label, "at Derek, at the glowing tent, this has always been about the family name. The exact phrase. The same 6 words from the truck ride home at 15, the same 6 words from the kitchen at 26, delivered now with a champagne flute in hand, and a room full of witnesses who would never know what those words had cost. I felt them land the way a familiar bruise responds to a familiar pressure, an old ache finding its exact shape again. I set down the pitcher I was holding. I untied the apron. I walked, unhurried, toward the head table, the folder from Farah's office held flat against my side like something ordinary, like a wine list, like nothing at all. Visual: a raised champagne glass, a gold foil wine label, a hostess resting a hand on a guest's shoulder. The jazz trio was easing into a second song. The caterers were beginning to clear the salad plates, and somewhere behind me I could hear my mother's laugh rising over the murmur of 40 conversations, the sound she made when she believed a room was going exactly the way she planned it. Miriam Choi noticed me first, the way lawyers notice a door opening in a room they are trying to control. "I'm sorry to interrupt the toast," I said, my voice level, the same tone I used when a wine club member asked why their shipment was delayed. "But there's something in the disclosure packet that isn't accurate, and I think it matters before Monday." The table went quiet in stages. My mother first, then my father, then Derek, his glass still half raised. "Naomi, this really isn't the time," my mother said, a warning wrapped in a smile for Warner Sinclair's benefit. I opened the folder. I slid the first document across the tablecloth to Miriam Choi. "This is the federal trademark registration for the mark Hollow Creek," I said. "Number 57-14882, registered 8 years ago. Owned individually by Naomi R. Voss, sole owner, no co-owner listed anywhere on the record. Not by the LLC. There has never been a license agreement granting the company the right to use it." I slid the second document. "This is a renewal filing I submitted 11 months ago, confirming continuous personal ownership." Derek's laugh came out thin and fast. "Naomi, what is this? Are you seriously doing this right now?" I slid the third document, a printed ledger. "This is $13,820 in personal funds. I've spent maintaining the domain, the hosting, and the design tools this business has used for 8 years. None of it reimbursed, none of it documented as a loan." Warner Sinclair set down his glass slowly, his tan somehow looking less expensive under the string lights. "Derek," he said, "you told my team the LLC owned all its own IP outright." My mother's hand found my father's sleeve. "Naomi's always been our foundation," she said, her voice thinner now, reaching for the old script like a rope over water. "Why would we change that now?" I looked at her for a long moment. "You said it yourself tonight," I said. "This has always been about the family name." I let the silence hold for a full second, long enough for the jazz trio to finish a phrase before I finished it myself. "You're right. It is about the family name. It's mine." Visual. A folder on a white tablecloth. A trademark certificate under string lights. A lawyer reading a ledger. Miriam Choi read the registration with the same unhurried focus she'd shown the entire meal, her finger tracing the line with the registration date. Then the ownership field. Then once more, the ownership field. She turned to Warner Sinclair. According to federal records, which I can verify from my phone right now, Ms. Voss is the sole registered owner of this mark, she said. The disclosure schedule your team signed states unambiguously that the seller owns its intellectual property, free and clear. That representation is false. Under the agreement's warranty clause, that's grounds to walk away from this deal tonight, not Monday. Warner Sinclair's face did the thing faces do when a number changes in real time. A slow recalculation behind the eye. He stood. He did not look at Derek. He looked at me, then at Miriam Choi, then back at his own glass, still half full, and set it down with a small, final click against the tablecloth. I think we're done here for tonight, he said. Only 2 seats down, Claire sat very still, her hand resting on the stem of her own glass, and for half a second, before her face rearranged itself into something diplomatic, her eyes met mine across the table with a flicker of recognition I hadn't expected. The same look she might have given me through a pass-through kitchen window 3 years earlier, if either of us had been brave enough. She did not defend Derek. She did not say a word at all. She simply looked down at her plate, and something in that small, deliberate silence felt louder to me than anything my mother had said all evening. Derek stood up so fast, his chair scraped the wooden platform with a sound like a scream. She's my sister, he said, too loud now, the jazz trio faltering mid-phrase. She works here. This is a family issue, not a legal one. She's upset, that's all. She gets emotional. Derek, Miriam Choi said, not unkindly, closing her folio with a soft leather snap. Your sister owns the name on the bottle you're holding. That isn't an emotion. That's a public record. My father finally looked up from the documents, his face gray under the string lights, and said the only thing he said to me directly all night. Naomi, sweetheart, we can fix this quietly, can't we? After everyone's gone home. I looked at him for a long moment, at the man who had once told a room full of judges that a 14-year-old boy had painted my label. We could have, I said. For 8 years we could have. I reached back into the folder and pulled out the last page, a single printed sheet. This is my formal notice terminating any informal license to use the mark Hollow Creek. Effective immediately, I said. I'm also revoking access to the domain, the hosting account, the wine club database, and the social media accounts, all of which are registered to me personally. Legal counsel has copies, as of this morning. My father's hand was shaking around his fork. It slipped and struck his water glass, tipping it, a thin dark line of red wine spreading across the white cloth like a small map of something finally breaking open in the light. I picked up the empty folder. I did not raise my voice once. I turned and walked past the string lights, past the oak trees I had sketched at 15, toward the gravel lot, and no one followed me. Not that night. Visual. A spilled wine glass on white linen. An empty folder. String lights fading behind a walking figure. The fallout arrived in pieces over the following 3 weeks. The way water finds every low point in a floor, it was never meant to sit on. Ridgeline's attorney sent a formal notice on Monday morning, terminating negotiations, citing material misrepresentation regarding intellectual property ownership, copied to my father, my mother, and Derek. The Vineyards Bank, alerted by a routine review after the domain and hosting lapsed and an autopay bounced for the first time in company history, called for a full accounts review before releasing the next line of credit against harvest expenses. My father left me 2 voicemails, quiet ones, his voice smaller than I remembered it. Derek left 9, the first several furious, the last few mostly silence and breathing. My mother sent 3 messages that began with variations of "How could you embarrass this family?" and ended every time with some version of "We need to talk, as a family, like adults." I read them standing at my own kitchen counter, in my own apartment, and did not answer past the first line. Word moved quickly through the small, well-connected world of regional food and wine, the way it does when a deal collapses in front of 40 witnesses holding phones, half of whom, I would later learn, had already posted something about it before their cars left the gravel lot. Claire's parents, whose restaurants had proudly poured Hollow Creek by the glass for 2 years, quietly pulled the wine from all 3 menus within the month, a decision Claire never explained to Derek and never needed to. I heard about it secondhand, from Farah, who heard it from someone at a trade event, and I felt no satisfaction in it, only a small, quiet confirmation that the people worth impressing had, in the end, been paying closer attention than my family ever gave them credit for. Arthur Kessler, the family's attorney, the same tired, kind man who had filed my original application 11 years earlier, called me on a Thursday, not angry, only confused in the particular way of a man realizing a house he'd been standing in for years had no foundation under it at all. He said the LLC couldn't legally continue selling wine under a label it had no right to use, that a rebrand would take months and cost more than the harvest was worth this year, that he needed to know, plainly, whether I intended to ever license the name back. "Arthur," I said, "ask Derek. He's the founder." There was a long pause, the sound of a pen clicking somewhere on the other end of the line. "Naomi," he said finally, "Derek doesn't know the wine club platform password." "He never has." "I know," I said. "He never needed to. That was always the point." Visual. A law office desk, a phone on speaker, a stack of unopened certified mail. The relabeling took the family 4 months and, according to Arthur, nearly $90,000 in new packaging, new signage, and a scramble to inform every distributor and wine club subscriber that Hollow Creek was effective immediately. Something called Thorn Hollow Cellars, a name Derek chose himself in a single afternoon, printed in a font I would never have approved. The wine club lost 60% of its members in the transition. Subscribers who had, it turned out, been writing to me for years without knowing it, replying to a newsletter voice they trusted and would not extend blindly to a stranger's rebrand. 2 of the 4 regional distributors carrying the wine quietly declined to renew once the new packaging arrived, citing, in identical language, brand confusion in the marketplace, a phrase that struck me when I read it in Arthur's forwarded email as the most honest sentence anyone in that family's orbit had produced in 8 years. My mother texted once in November, no apology in it, only a single line. "Your father's blood pressure has been terrible. I hope you're proud of yourself." I did not reply. I had learned slowly that silence was not cruelty, only the absence of a performance I no longer owed anyone. My father texted in January, 3 short sentences typed the way a man types, who still treats a phone like a telegraph. "I didn't know it was that bad. I thought you wanted to help. I should have asked what it cost you. I read it sitting on my own small balcony, coffee going cold in my hands. I read it 3 times. It was not an apology, not fully, but it was the first honest sentence he had sent me in 18 years. I did not answer that day. I answered the next morning, 4 words. Thank you for saying that. He did not write again. I did not expect him to. Some doors, once opened even a little, only show you exactly how far apart two people have grown, and no further than that. Visual. A repainted sign reading a new winery name. A balcony coffee cup. A single unanswered text thread. I live in a small house now, 40 minutes from the ocean, with a design studio built out of what used to be the garage. Farah helped me set up my own LLC that winter, a small branding studio that carries my actual name on the door, and my first client, fittingly, was a tiny family-run cidery, 2 towns over, who wanted a label that looked like it meant something. And this time, I sent an invoice, and this time, I got paid. I registered the trademark for my own studio's mark within the first month. Myself. No shoebox of paperwork left for someone else to forget. The cidery client referred a second client by spring, a small ceramics studio 2 towns further out, and by summer I had a real client list with real signed contracts, each one carrying a clause I wrote myself, in plain language stating exactly who would own what, from the very first invoice. I have a dog now, a rescue mutt named Beryl, which made Farah laugh so hard she nearly dropped her coffee when I told her the name. I have a mug I bought with my first studio paycheck, plain and blue. The first thing I ever purchased purely because I liked the color, not because someone else needed it more. I wake up without an alarm most mornings. I make coffee in the blue mug. I read at my own small table without checking a phone for wine club emergencies or hosting alerts that were never really mine to fix in the first place. And some mornings I catch myself waiting for the old dread to show up anyway, out of habit, the way a phantom limb still aches long after the surgery, and then I notice it hasn't come. And I go back to my coffee. On Sundays I walk Beryl along the coast road, and do not think about oak trees or string lights unless I choose to. I still love the smell of a vineyard in September. I have simply stopped waiting for anyone to say my name out loud in a room where it mattered, because I say it myself now, on invoices, on registrations, on the small brass plate beside my studio door that reads, simply, Naomi Voss Design. My name is Naomi. I am 33.